Unlock more growth with AWIN. Tackle acquisition, conversions, and retention by tapping into a network of over 1 million affiliate partners. It's quite a lot. With everything from partner management to reporting and payments in one easy dashboard, AWIN helps brands drive real, scalable results, the best kind. Visit awin.com/emarketer, of course, to learn more. Hey gang, it's Wednesday, August 20th. Suzy, Brian, and listeners, welcome to Reimagining Retail, an e-marketing podcast made possible by AWIN. I'm Marcus, your host for today, and joining me for the conversation we have two folks, both living in New York. Our VP of Content heading up our retail desk based here in the city. It's Suzy Davidkhanian.
Hey Marcus, thanks for having me.
Of course, and we're also joined by the founder and CEO of Mack Weldon, Brian Berger. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Marcus. Great to be here.
Yes, sir. Today's topic, retail partnerships. Today we're talking all about retail partnerships, and we wanted to start off by talking about one that's been in the news quite recently. It's Warby Parker and Target. So Warby Parker opening 5 mini stores within Target shops this year in Illinois, Minnesota, New Jersey, Ohio, and Pennsylvania as well, and will be available on Target's website. You can buy Warby Parker things, the glasses people, on Target's website, as well as in their stores, a couple of them at least. Brian, what to you are the right conditions for a successful store-in-store relationship? Because we've seen these before. What makes them work versus crashing and burning?
It's always a 1 + 1 = 3 is the ideal situation where both parties bring something to the table that the customer values. And as a result, both businesses and brands benefit. So I think that's a great illustration of a case where Target bringing in Warby's value proposition and customer experience into their environment is something that is absolutely a net positive for Target and their consumers. And for Warby Parker as a brand, they've done a great job opening up their own direct retail stores, but certainly the reach and scale of Target is pretty significant.
Yeah.
And so this opens up a whole new array of customers for Warby Parker. Warby Parker's brand as well.
Yeah, Suzy, Rachel Wolf agrees entirely with Brian here. She writes for our retail briefing saying, the Warby Parker Target partnership is a win-win for both. Warby Parker gets the benefit of Target's much larger audience, as well as the chance to quickly ramp up its brick and mortar footprint should the shop-in-shop model prove successful. Meanwhile, the association with a cool brand like Warby Parker could boost Target's customer appeal and help drive a sales recovery.
I mean, I leaning a little bit on the definitely mutually beneficial is key when you're thinking about partnerships. And I think, we're talking about shop in shop. So like a partnership to broaden your distribution, but there are lots of different types of partnerships. And maybe we'll circle back to just even thinking about what is a partnership and what are all the different flavors and variations. In this particular instance today, I would say it is a big win for Target to lean on the cool factor from Warby Parker. Yep. I understand that Target has many more stores and it's easier to do pop-up stores or shop-in-shops than it is to do your own stores. But given all of the, less Target sort of branding that's happening right now, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Critical, I think, is around aligning consumers, your vision, your mission statements, and making sure that it's mutually beneficial. So there was a day I could have seen it as a home run. Today, I'm a little bit less sure.
Yeah. I want to talk about how you decide who to partner with. But to your point, Suzy, there are a lot of different flavors. What are some of those flavors of partnerships?
Well, I think it depends. If you start with a question of what you're trying to achieve, and so I'm going to talk about it in a more theoretical, and then Brian's going to talk about it in a more tactical way. But, once you know what you're trying to achieve, whether it's higher sales volume, maybe new customer acquisition, maybe you just need to do brand awareness. Maybe you're going into an adjacent category that you don't have a lot of, legitimacy or authenticity, and you need to partner with an influencer who can help you. So once you know what you're trying to achieve, then I think it comes to that point, which I still love from the lead and think about it all the time, the 1 + 1 = 3, when Brian and I were talking about partnerships then. So I think you have to start with that.
True synergy. Yeah. Brian, how about for you? How do you decide who to partner with?
I think Suzy's thoughts are spot on. It starts with what is the strategy and what's the objective. And we are typically, when we're looking at our marketing calendar, we're thinking about those things. For example, we have a new product launch happening in Q1. It's a performance underwear style. We're thinking about that product launch and how can we amplify it beyond just our own sort of owned marketing channels. So we partner with Mile High Run Club. We get some of their athletes who are also influencers, some of their instructors who are also in and of themselves influencers with decent social media platforms to effectively endorse the product, right? Both from the standpoint of like communicating about it, but also wearing it and speaking about it from a first person basis. So like that's an example of our being sort of thoughtful about the kind of partnership we want to do and what it's going to serve for us. And there are other examples like that. You know, summertime, this summer, leading into summer, we partnered with a swim brand called Berger. It's a Canadian brand that makes all of its product locally in Vancouver. So it enabled us to come together and collaborate on a product using their sort of like category cachet, but enabling us to put a little bit more of our DNA into the product.
Yeah.
And then do like more of a capsule thing to kind of kick off summer. So those are two examples, and there's many more I can provide that serve different needs.
And I think one of the critical things to remember as a brand is the size of the audience of the partner doesn't necessarily matter as much if you have the right alignment. And I think it's really important to think about the audience composition of your partner more than its size, right? If you are looking to target a niche group, you don't necessarily need to have the biggest audience. You need to have the right audience. And so partnering with the Mile High Running Club is a great way to help showcase performance in a really authentic way. So as brands are thinking about partnerships, I think that's a critical point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I would just add to that, like you may want, you know, we always try and punch above our weight with these things, but it doesn't always work out, right? You could spend your entire life chasing the big, you know, holy grail of a partner, and it may never come just because, you know, they're trying to do the same thing, punch above their weight. You know, the Warby Target example is a good example of that, right? So the key is to not, you know, kind of psych yourself out. You need to get experience doing these things. You need to understand what works. And I think that also begets more, you know, opportunities, right? The more you can show up to a prospective larger partner with, hey, we did these 3 or 4 things. Or if you're a brand that's known to execute partnerships or collaborations really well, I think it's more likely that you'll get attention from somebody who's perhaps bigger than you and maybe less inclined to essentially take your call.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned that, you know, the recent partnership in summer, you said you've got one coming up in Q1. Do you have one, Brian, that's kind of one of your most memorable partnerships?
You know, it's kind of hard to say most memorable, but I guess if I had to answer that question, I would say that our business brand launch partnership with Equinox Fitness in the early days. So it's like 12 years, it's going back 12 or 13 years ago. One of the objectives that we had when we launched the business was we need to bring the brand to life in real life. And since we are a digital brand, you know, it's going to be important that consumers can kind of run into the product in the real world.
Yep.
But at the same time, we were kind of trying to avoid being a traditional wholesale brand. And so Equinox, it gave us the ability to really check a bunch of boxes, right? It was perceived to be a really big deal by the outside world, whomever that was, consumers, investors, partners, employees, the press. There was a revenue stream associated with it. They were buying product from us and we were generating a little bit of revenue there. And it was a great customer acquisition channel for us that also sort of checked the brand box, right? Like the main reason guys go into Equinox to buy anything, it's usually headphones, socks, and underwear. And so the fact that we're able to be the brand that shows up for them when they're in need was really also checking like a utility box for us, which is really important, you know, in the early days of the brand.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we're doing it better. We're helping you. We're making shopping experience easier, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that example. Bringing the brand to life. It's, right off the bat. Suzy, have there been any partnerships that you've seen from afar that you've been particularly impressed with?
I mean, I'm constantly impressed by them. And I think some of the things I look for are, that the fit and the surprise and delight is bigger than the hype. So while there was a lot of hype around the Dunkin' Donut Kahlua tie-up, I kind of think it was extremely cleverly done, right? It's similar markets, a similar flavor profile, in similar markets in terms of adults that drink coffee, may also like the taste of coffee alcohol, having that tie-up. It's not meant to be at all a volume driver. So back to thinking about what your objectives are so that you can measure success in a critically correct way, really helps. So like for me, that was a really interesting one. Another recent one that I was in love with was Corona. Everybody knows Corona as the like beach drink, right? And so they partnered with a swimwear brand to do like a quick drop of swimsuits with Corona branding. It was a small assortment, not a lot of SKUs. It was a short-lived thing, but it was to celebrate their birthday, a very special anniversary. And it kind of had a wow factor, but it wasn't like, oh, I have to really give it some thought as to why these two brands go well together. It just made sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of them make too much sense. They kind of, when it happens, you're like, why hasn't this happened sooner? Something like Starbucks being in Barnes & Noble, coffee and books go extremely well together. Other partnerships kind of come out of left field, but they can still work just as well, if not better. Brian, have there been any partnerships that you've seen from afar that you've been particularly impressed with?
I'm loving all of these like random kind of food collaborations that are happening with flavors of things. But one that I saw recently that I loved was a brand that we know and respect a lot called Tecovas. They make cowboy boots. They're a sort of disruptor of that very important category of products. They do like leather goods, but their primary like origin is really in cowboy boots. And they did a collaboration with Chili's, the restaurant Chili's. And it's a colorway and an insole of their shoe. And again, it's probably not like a huge, massive revenue driver for them, but like definitely very buzzworthy, definitely very creative. And like, I think just the brand cred alone of like seeing that show up and you're like, oh, that really makes a lot of sense. That was one that I saw recently that I thought was great.
That's so fun because if you think about the halo effect too, right, in terms of like all of a sudden you have influencers talking about you. You have regular everyday people who are at the restaurant that are posting pictures and maybe tagging you that you can reuse as creative. I mean, the storytelling piece can have such long legs, and then the PR and all the other buzz that's earned in addition to whatever it is that you're going to pay for buzz, I think is that other important thing to think about. How do you reuse assets? Yeah.
Suzy, I want to talk about something you said earlier, which was, it was the collaboration you were talking about. You said it was short term. And there was a question that I'd seen you ask, I believe it was in a panel at an event before, and it was talking about how long-term partnerships look versus one-off collaborations. Brian, I'm wondering for you at Mack Weldon, how do you approach long-term partnerships versus one-off collaborations, and what goes into those decisions?
I think long-term partnerships need to, a key part of it is that there's an aspect of it that is fundamental to the business or mutually fundamental. And maybe the Equinox is like a good example of that. Like that partnership served their needs, served our needs, and was rooted in something that was kind of fundamental to how they operate. They have buyers that go out and figure out the merchandising strategy for the stores. We're a part of that. They buy product from us. The economic deal is clear. So it didn't really require a lot of maintenance once it was initiated. Obviously, we're always trying to grow it and figure out ways to maybe sell in or augment with other products. We did a couple of what I would call, bolt-ons where we launched some new product with Equinox. We launched our AirKnit X underwear program, which is also like a microfiber, not necessarily made for sport, but tends to lean more performance. And so we did a whole thing with their trainers in their locker room. We did a shoot there. And so that was like on top of the base, program where we were, effectively their chosen underwear brand in store. So I guess that's just a long way of saying, there has to be fundamentals that do not require constant maintenance from both sides.
Yeah.
And it needs to be able to be delivering on the value proposition for both sides, on somewhat perpetual basis. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. It just sort of like starts out really good because everyone's focused on it, and then it peters out and it just becomes not so great, and everyone's kind of frustrated by it. So there needs to be an ongoing benefit.
Yeah. Suzy, what's your take on the approaches to long-term partnerships versus the one-off collabs?
I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things we forget sometimes is that distribution centers, like as a wholesaler, the retailer that you end up in is also a partner. And so those are the longer collaborations, if you will, the longer partnerships where, to Brian's point, there has to be mutual value. You have to have the same sort of brand cultures, the same missions, the same willingness to put in effort so that you share some of those expenses potentially, that you are ensuring that you're delivering a strong customer experience in the store or online, or at any touch point, really, that means the same thing to both of your brands. When I was at e-tail, I was on stage with Samsonite, and he was telling us a little bit more about how they choose their retailers to be in line with some of these things, and they consider them wholeheartedly as partners. So I feel like it's one flavor of partnerships, and those are the ones that last the longest.
Yeah. Yeah, when you were just talking just then, I was thinking of the episode we talk about retail partnerships, but the way you were describing it, especially with regards to the effort put in on both sides, it is kind of a retail relationship in a lot of respects. And you got to pick the right one, but you got to work at it whilst you're in it. Brian, let's end with this. What to you would be one lesson learned from a past collaboration that has shaped how you approach partnerships today?
What I would say that is most important is that you're really clear on how you're going to measure success. And that does not mean that the partnership needs to deliver revenue or some sort of specific ROI that you might judge your other marketing investments by. Whatever the criteria is, I think the more clear and specific you are about that up front, the more successful the partnership will be. This is an area where you can waste a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money. So if you're not clear, then you are at risk of having a very poorly performing partnership strategy.
Yeah.
So for us, one of the big learnings is making sure that we identify all.
And by measurement, are you talking about the metrics by which you will measure this, or where on that scale we are going to say we achieve success?
I think it's both, but I would start with the former, which is just, okay, we're doing this partnership and our objectives are, we want to see sales of this collaborative product. We want to see social media impressions or engagement levels of this. We want our partners to promote the campaign in these ways on these channels. Like, just as specific as you can be about what those are, the better off you'll be. And at least you'll know whether or not you've hit the mark. And then within those, I think over time, you can say like, okay, this is what good, medium, and bad looks like from a social media engagement perspective, or a sales perspective, or once you get a little bit more experience under your belt. But at the beginning, it's really just, make sure you know why you're investing time, effort, and money in something like this.
Yeah. Suzy, any best practices to end on?
I mean, I, as a watcher, because at Macy's, I didn't necessarily work on the partnership piece, but as a watcher, I would say, you don't like round hole square peg, right? Not every brands that are amazing should be working together. And that if you try and wedge a partnership together, whether it's long-term or short-term, and there is no reason for being, even if that's to create a little bit of tension, right? Sometimes I think people try and create tension to get buzz and hype. So if you don't think through, like Brian was saying, not only just the KPIs, but also the reason for being, then I think it's going to be a miss. And don't just say yes to every request because you think it's going to do well.
Yeah. Excellent note to end on. Thank you so much to my guests for being on today. Thank you first to Suzy.
Thanks for having me.
And of course to Brian.
Thank you so much, Marcus.
Thank you, sir. And thanks to the whole editing crew and to everyone for listening into Reimagining Retail, an eMarketer podcast made possible by Awin. I hope to see you on Friday's Behind the Numbers show, where we'll be making some predictions about the future of digital.